Cari genitori, come abbiamo visto nel video precedente, sembra che la scuola stia adottando un cambiamento, che cambiamento in realtà non è, quello del punteggio e del passaggio di livello e di educare una società a punto e livello. E in realtà questa situazione è già esistente. Siamo passati da un momento di sperimentazione e successivamente a una pratica vera e propria, che è quella che a breve verrà messa in atto per creare una società ubbidiente, addestrata ai livelli bestiali. Dico questo termine perché più avanti potrete vedere un video che vi chiarirà ulteriormente di qual è il piano globale. Premio e punizione sono già presenti nella scuola da molto tempo. In più, sempre di più, sono state inserite delle schede per velocizzare l'apprendimento, considerando il bambino come un contenitore vuoto da riempire di informazioni, come un computer. Parlo del computer perché la risposta immediata è proprio una parte meccanica, quindi si va a sviluppare sempre più una capacità meccanica. Molti genitori di questo sono molto contenti. Mio figlio ha imparato a leggere e scrivere a 4 anni. Accelerano sempre di più i processi di apprendimento, non rispettando la normale crescita del cervello del bambino, nonché della struttura fisica. Perché c'è questa competizione? Perché per i livelli di gioco devi essere anche molto competitivo e anche i genitori si mettono in gioco. Mio figlio fa questo, il mio un po' di più, e si va sempre a una richiesta maggiore di prestazioni da parte del bambino, in modo che sia sempre pronto a domanda e risposta, domanda e risposta. Questo è lo sviluppo della parte meccanica, che però trascura molto lo sviluppo della logica e del ragionamento e nonché della formazione della coscienza e la conoscenza di se stesso. Conosce tutte le regole esterne, ma non conosce se stesso. Io, per quanto mi riguarda, metterò a mia disposizione tutta la mia conoscenza. Peraltro questa scuola già esiste, ma esiste per poche persone. E però, visto il momento, vogliamo che anche altri abbiano questa possibilità di intraprendere un viaggio con i propri figli per sviluppare la coscienza, in modo che siano consapevoli di ciò che gli accade intorno e che non siano così recettivi, botta e risposta, senza pensare. Adesso vi lascio al video, così capite meglio qual è l'obiettivo che vogliono raggiungere, come vogliono i vostri figli.
Charlotte Thompson Iserby served as the head of policy at the Department of Education during the first administration of Ronald Reagan. While working there, she discovered a long-term strategic plan by the tax-free foundations to transform America from a nation of rugged individualists and problem solvers to a country of servile, brainwashed minions who simply regurgitate whatever they're told. We now present to you the secret history of Western education, the scientific destruction of minds.
The minutes reveal that in 1910, the Carnegie trustees asked themselves this question, quote, is there any way known to man more effective than war to so alter the life of an entire people? For a year, the trustees sought an effective, peaceful method to alter the life of an entire people. But ultimately, they concluded that war was the most effective way to change people. Oh, God. World War I. Horrible war. Oh, I mean, made every other war look like nothing. They sent a confidential message to President Wilson insisting that the war not be ended too quickly. After the war, the Carnegie Endowment trustees reasoned that if they could get control, here we go, of education in the United States, they would be able to prevent a return to the way of life as it had been prior to the war. And they recruited the Rockefeller Foundation to assist in such a monumental task. Education should aim at destroying free will so that pupils are thus schooled they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. Influences of the home are obstructive, and in order to condition students, verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. It is for a future scientist to make these maxims precise and discover exactly how much it costs per head to make children believe that snow is black. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. End quote.
Young people cannot be trusted to form their own opinions. It's our job to tell them.
We're in Grenada. We go back to the United States. I put the children in public school. So here we go. I had no idea that education would be any different from sort of what I'd had. I had had a good education, a private school education, but I didn't know. And so they go into the public school system in Camden, Maine. And in retrospect, I believe that that was a pilot school, one of them for the whole country, for changing our education system from an academic classical educational system to brainwashing for the international socialist government. Everybody has all the research on this. I have so much. It's all in my book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. I hit Camden and I start asking, I get on a little committee, philosophy committee, and we were all asked by the superintendent, highly skilled change agent out of Harvard, well, I want to know what all of you feel the purpose of education should be. And so I said, well, I think it should be to give the students a sound academic education in basics and also a strong sense of sound morals and values. And boom, they all looked at me and they said, whose values? And I thought, hey, what's going on here? I said, well, what's happened in my country? I mean, don't we still have the same values? I mean, what don't we all sort of agree? You don't steal, you don't rob, you don't kill babies, you don't kill people in war, you don't, a lot of things that I thought we believed in. You don't lie. Everything was changing, and I saw it, and I saw the curriculum coming in, and I went for the values clarification training myself to find out. I had a call from a master teacher who taught all over the world, and she said, you are absolutely correct. I was on the school board by that time. After 3 tries, I got on. And she said, you're absolutely correct. I want to pay for you to go for some in-service training. And I said, in what? And she said, well, it's called Innovations in Education, and it's how to become a change agent. She paid $100 for me to go. I went. And all these normal-looking people, nice, some from my own school district and all, and the guy is a facilitator, but he's using this big book called Innovations in Education, A Change Agent's Guide. And it has all these case studies of teachers and administrators and how to sneak in controversial curriculum such as death ed, sex ed, bullying ed, alcohol ed, drug ed, all these programs that have education hanging off the end of them that have nothing to do with education. It's interesting. You don't have math ed and science ed and all. They call it math and science and history, right? But when you see anything with education hanging off the end of it, red flag, huh? In that training, he taught us how to identify resistors in our community. And they were the people who were smart, who knew that these programs were designed for nothing other than to make children engage in sex, to drink, to take drugs, to do all the things that the parents were being told the programs were to help the children. I was considered a resistor too. Here they were training me to identify myself, huh? And so I never, ever got over that. Also, we were being trained to go to the important people in the community, and they're really very good people. We all know who they are. They're friends of ours, know, but they're head of Rotary, head of Garden Club, head of Historical Society. You go to them and you explain to them in very, very good, highly skilled change agent manner, which is just lies, how important these programs are for your children. We've got to put these programs in. This was 1973 all the way through right now. Huh? That period in education, we call it the unfreezing of our children's values, the ones taught by the parents at home and the church, basically. Change agents were highly trained by the National Training Laboratories. We had the headquarters for that in Bethel, Maine. That goes all the way back to World War II. I have the original paper from that, and it said that what they're putting in is they want to change the values to unfreeze the system, and then they're going to implement the new values, the new communist values for world government. Huh? So that was the goal, and they did a good job on it between 1970 and the year 2000. And now the values, as we can all see, people are saying, oh, well, we've got to be tolerant, there are no absolutes anymore. That's not fair to judge people. Don't be judgmental. If your grandmother is dying of cancer and you can't afford the medicine, it's okay to steal it. That's what you call values clarification with the education for a planned economy, using workforce training, identifying children at a very early age what they're going to do the rest of their lives. It's the Soviet planned economic system, starting as early as first grade. That's being put in now under the guise of school choice, charter schools, and using the performance-based, outcome-based Skinnerian Pavlovian method with a computer. Pavlov, interestingly enough, was a Russian. People think that he invented operant conditioning. He didn't. He went to Leipzig, Germany, and he studied under Wilhelm Wundt in the 1800s, mid-1800s. Wilhelm Wundt was a philosopher, German philosopher, who was involved in trying to figure out how you can get people to do change, understanding the psychology, what makes people click, how you can get them to do what you want them to do, etc. And he became very frustrated with the inability to change people's behavior and their views and everything, doing the traditional way, lectures and this and that and all, and discussions and all. And finally, he realized that what he was dealing with was the human soul. The soul is a very difficult thing to track. It sort of floats all over the place, and it rebels, and it doesn't, it's independent. And so he came up with a scheme to attack the nervous system. That's really what it is. It's neurological. If you can get them to react in certain ways to what you want, like when the doctor, give you a good idea, the doctor used to, physical exams, they'd take a hammer, a little rubber thing, and knock your knee, and it goes boop. So he figured, well, you know what? We can operate on that thesis where we attack the nervous system. And it's a stimulus response thing. So you have to provide the stimulus in order to get the response. Well, if it was dog training, the stimulus would be a dog biscuit or something. And ultimately, when the dog sees you taking the biscuit out of the box, he's going to do what you want, right? And so it's really pretty simple. I had never gotten involved in having to figure it out until a very good friend of mine, a teacher in Arizona, had to go through the first program that was brought out of 1965. One of the first ones, it was called Mastery Learning. And she quit education when she went through the training. She said it was so sick, and she had papers from doctors and all saying it even makes children sick. And I met her when I went into the U.S. Department of Ed, because I found her correspondence came to my office, and it was referred to me, and that was how I met her. And she was the one who educated me about operant conditioning and how awful it is. I mean, it can absolutely destroy free will. We had free will until we got to the computer. The computer absolutely destroys. The child there's no thinking going on there. There's no transfer being made. And you've got to understand that. All the documents in regard to this by people, not myself, by educators who have been trained in it, are in my book. So you don't have to say Charlotte said that. You can say Professor so-and-so said that. I have one incredible paper in the back of my book by a leading educator written in the 60s that I managed to get. It was attached to the Project Best application for funding that I talked about, the one I got fired for. And that paper talks about the need for computers and how wonderful they're going to be and all. But he says, if you don't agree with the message morally and ethically that's going on to that software, do not do it. And that's coming right out of the mouth of an educator involved in it. He says you have to have a conscience, because that software is so powerful that no matter, you may think, oh, well, the person on the other end, he can do what he wants and make up. No. Once it's in the software, and once the child is clicking away on the computer and getting the little happy face as the reward, that's what happens. We all know that feeling when we get something good on the computer. He's not going to ask any questions. That's it. Finished. And it can bring the student to a certain totally opposite position in their thinking using Socratic questioning. So it's very dangerous. I can't tell you how dangerous it is. I mean, how dangerous is a method that can actually change, actually destroy one's conscience. That's bad news. And we were all softened up, and that's what we're looking at today. Now, the refreezing has to take place. The refreezing is going to take place with the use of the computer. Schools will be bookless. They are already some of these programs coming in. So anyway, I was on the board. I saw that. I went for the retraining. Then I got off the board, and I formed with Bettina Dobbs of Maine, a wonderful teacher and a nurse. We formed something called Guardians of Education for Maine. And we were in business for about 15 years. We did a lot of very good work. In 1980, I went to work for Ronald Reagan, and I worked there for 2 years until I was fired. Right. But I had worked hard for him from 1978 to get him elected. Right. And then in 1980, because of the work I'd done and the work in education, I got an appointment in the U.S. Department of Education. Because the people in Washington, with the conservatives, they were good back then. They're not anymore. They were very impressed by the work I'd done in Maine on education. So they pulled me down and put me in the U.S. Department of Ed in what was the most important slot probably in the world in education. I know people out there are shaking their head and say, why would they put her there? She doesn't have a college education, right? Why are they putting her in there? Well, they knew, first of all, Reagan had promised to get rid of the Department of Education, something he didn't do, and I will hold that against him forever, because he could have. Since that was the plan, when they were staffing the department, they didn't have to put important people in those old slots. Like my slot that I got put into would have been filled by the former president of Harvard or Stanford or something, right? or University of Chicago. That job had been held in the past by very important people in education. But since they were getting rid of the department, it didn't make any difference. So they just plopped me in. Now talk about the hand of God, huh? And all my files were full of everything they planned on doing. And so I don't even think my boss knew this. You know, he was a so-called conservative. But he became very suspicious about me because I was always busy. Even though I didn't have a lot of work to do from him, I was always busy because I had lots of things to read. And I would stay after work. I'd stay until 2 a.m. in the morning. When everybody was gone, I'd get into everything. Sure, if it had just been the job and all the files and everything had been whisked away by these former very important educational change agent communists, Marxists, I would not have found stuff, but all the stuff was left in the office. What I saw was so depressing. That's hardly the word. I mean, this was the education of Charlotte. It was the greatest horror story I had ever encountered. And at one point, he sent me, he wanted to get rid of me out of that office. He sent me up to the National Institute of Education, which is where all the research is performed. They send out all the grants and contracts to the universities or schools or whatever from there. I found out I was really in the belly of the beast right there, because I had access to all the computer printouts of all the grants and contracts of your money folks going out, not just across our country, but all around the world, about how to change the education system from academics to a brainwashing using Pavlovian, Skinnerian, operant conditioning computers and workforce training for the globalist economy, the corporate fascist socialist communist government that's coming right in this minute. Latest article that I've written with Debbie Niwa, a wonderful researcher, a magnificent person and brilliant, did all the graphics and formatting and a lot of her own research as well on change agents and how they brought Americans to have a totally different mindset using all of the sensitivity training. Debbie had some fantastic research of hers is in that article. As well as at the end of writing it, we came across extraordinary quotes from C.S. Lewis, who points out that if you substitute workforce training for education, that's the end of civilization. It's the end of the human being as an entity opposed to being an animal. It's the end of the human soul. It's the end of the conscience. And we have all of the evidence from educators and change agents, articles saying that the computer is fantastic for changing values. An educator with the World Institute for Computer Assisted Instruction, his name is Dustin Houston, where he talks about, won't it be wonderful when the child in the smallest school, most remote area in the country can have the curriculum developed by the world's finest psychologists, and nobody can get between that child and the curriculum. Parents, wake up. That means you, parents, you can't get between the child and that curriculum. You can't control anything anymore. You've lost it. This is going in right now. And they say this works too. What works? I always wondered when I saw this stuff titled What Works in the U.S. Department of Ed, and I didn't pay too much attention. And one day I picked it up, something, and what works? Yeah, dog training works. If you reinforce, if you give rewards and all. And mind you, folks, the rewards are being passed out galore all over our country now, not just in education. In my former town of Bath, the police, the community-oriented policing system, the police are giving rewards to citizens who do good deeds. They give them a little medal. They see them help an older lady across the street who has groceries. The police determine what the good deed is. She gets a medal. That's a reward. That's conditioning. That's operant conditioning. You're going to end up with a society that never does anything for the sake of it being right. And they're never going to take a stand against anything unless it's approved by the government. So that's going to be the result of operant conditioning. It's throughout our community right now. The Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, when he was in Chicago, with the Chicago schools, he even recommended paying students for good grades. Now, that's why teachers are up in arms about merit pay, performance-based pay. That's the same thing. They're going to pay the teachers for students getting good test scores. Now, wait a minute. First of all, you might think that sounds good. No, you got to ask yourself, what's the test? It's hard to believe that anybody would deliberately do this to children, but they are. They're evil people, and their agenda has been evil ever since this book was written. This is it. Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robison, great Scottish scholar. Back in 1798, he was a Scottish Freemason, and he went to France and studied, French Orient Masonry, and was so shocked by what he saw, it was so much worse than the Scottish Rite, that he went back and wrote that book, which he actually did give a copy to George Washington. That book is like a global education textbook being used in the American schools right now. It talks about 1798. This is after the French Revolution. Get rid of royalty, get rid of religion, get rid of the family. That's basically what's in the book. Actually, they talk about dropping borders. Sounds just like a global ed curriculum. Turning the children against their parents. It's pure communism. That's why I say that now, basically, the only thing that we can do, certainly with education, which is being turned into nothing but corporate school-to-work agenda, using the Soviet-Cuban Polytech system, where they pull the children out, send them over to the cigar factory, at noon to learn how to make cigars. The same thing here. That's being put in. It's been in the works for 30 years. The nail is going in the coffin right now. It's coming out of Europe. It's the program that's going through Maine right now is called Reinventing Education. De Lorenzo. This is all in my article, The Death of Free Will. All of this documentation about the final nail in the coffin, which will be school to work across the board for global corporate profits. Our children are nothing but human resources and guinea pigs to be trained like animals. Animal training using pets.